My 60th birthday is today, and they have never really celebrated it before, but 2 weeks ago, while I was helping my grandson clean up his desk, I came across a handmade card with the words, "Happy Birthday, Grandma," on the front. I pretended not to notice it, but I couldn't help but feel hopeful that, even though no one had ever celebrated my 60th birthday before, maybe this time they would. I woke up early and cleaned the entire house until it was immaculate. After lunch, I showered, styled my hair for the first time in a long time, and put on my best-fitting navy blue dress. It wasn't until I sat in the living room waiting for them to get home from work that I realized I had forgotten to ask my son Brian where we were going to eat dinner tonight. He probably didn't respond when I texted him. I was in a meeting and sent Emily and Richard the same message, but neither of them responded. I couldn't sit still, so I went back upstairs to rearrange the bedroom and closet. After a while of fiddling around, I felt exhausted and fell asleep, but when I woke up, it was already dark. I sat up abruptly and slapped my forehead. Had they gone to the restaurant without me? I grabbed my phone, ready to call, but all I saw, I stared at the screen for a while before dialing Richard's number. "Hello," I had just begun to speak when he interrupted me. "What was it?" His tone was flat, as if he were taking a business call. "I was wondering where you were having dinner tonight. We're going out to eat." We didn't receive any responses to the messages I sent. I was about to say, "Today, Richard, come cut the cake," when I heard a woman's voice on the phone. I knew right away that it was Lucy Wells, the woman who had vanished from his life but never from his sight. "If it's nothing, let's talk later," he said and hung up. The sound of the call ending reverberated in my ears, and I stood there, stunned, as if something had struck me hard. When a thunderclap rolled outside the window, I picked up my phone and opened the social media app Emily had helped me install a short while ago. I used it to record small moments of life at home, and on the homepage, I noticed a new post Lucy had uploaded that included a video. I tapped on it to see Richard, Brian, Emily, and my grandson Jack. The caption read, "Warm birthday night with my loved ones," with trembling hands. I turned up the volume and played it repeatedly, then again and again and again. Jack's sweet voice calling Grandma and that birthday song that no one had ever sung for me kept echoing in my ears as they sat around a birthday cake singing a birthday song to her. Their faces were full of joy, like a perfectly happy family. That card wasn't for me, it was for another grandma, my husband, my son, and my entire family. Nobody remembered that it was my birthday, except for me. Then, in the video, I saw a menu and instantly recognized it. It was from a fancy French restaurant downtown, the same spot Richard would always choose when entertaining important clients. My eyes became blurry with tears, and I was unable to contain them. The husband I had been married to for 40 years never remembered my birthday, but he always remembered hers. I grabbed my purse and hurried out the door, flagging down a cab and going straight to that restaurant. It was rush hour, and the taxi crawled through traffic until it finally arrived. Even though I had carefully managed the household, saved every penny, and lived frugally for them, they threw a grand birthday celebration for another woman. As soon as I got out of the taxi, I saw Richard and Luke leaving the restaurant hand in hand, with Jack, Brian, and Emily following closely behind. They all looked like a picture-perfect family, smiling, and when Richard saw me, a flash of panic appeared on his face, but he quickly covered it up with his usual cool composure. "What are you doing here?" he asked, with a hint of reproach in his voice. "Am I not?" I said. "Allow me to be here." Lucy stepped in right away, smiling politely and speaking softly. "You must be made right, ho. I'm Lucy, Richard, and Jack, and they came to celebrate my birthday today." I asked them why they weren't here, and they said that they were feeling ill, so they stayed at home. She looked stunning, elegant, and poised with ease. Passing for a woman in her early 40s rather than her 50s, she had delicate makeup, well-groomed hair, and a voice as gentle as her manner. Before I could react, Jack abruptly withdrew from them and charged at me, shouting, "What are you doing here, you uneducated village woman?" He was quite strong for a 7-year-old, slamming his punch into my stomach and almost knocking me off balance. Emily frowned as she reprimanded Jack, saying, "You can't treat your grandma like that, she's not my grandma." Jack screamed angrily. "She talks weird, she's not like us, I don't like her, I don't want her to be my grandma." I stood there frozen, his words piercing me like a blade, and a wave of humiliation and rage rose so quickly that I couldn't contain it, so I ran over and grabbed Jack. I grabbed Jack by the arm and gave him a hard slap on the backside. Jack immediately started crying loudly, attracting the attention of passers-by. Emily was stunned and stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Brian came running over and shoved me aside, scooping Jack into his arms. "What the hell are you doing, Mom? Do you have to make a scene here?" he snapped. I looked up at my son and saw the disgust in his eyes. The restaurant manager seemed obviously uncomfortable and suggested that we move to the lounge to settle our private matters, but Richard waved him off without hesitation, avoiding my gaze. He rubbed his forehead and muttered, "Let's not make a bigger deal." Something inside me broke. This was the boy I had raised with all my love and care. I turned to Richard, not even sure what I was hoping for, maybe just to see if he still cared about me at all. "Don't read too much. Richard and I had a relationship when we were young, but that was decades ago. Now, we're just old friends. He only came tonight because he thought I was lonely since my husband passed away." The annoyance and superiority in his voice made me feel like I was just some pathetic woman making a public scene. Lucy added again, her tone gentle and almost comforting. "Perhaps you misunderstood." I took a deep breath and tried to swallow the fire that was rising in my chest. "Lucy, I didn't misunderstand anything, so you don't have to explain, but if it's okay with you, I need to talk to my family privately. Please give us some space." I spoke calmly because I didn't want to share our private problems with her, even in this moment of rage. Brian interrupted and said, "Daddy, take Lucy home. Mom will go with us fine." Richard said, "Why do you have to personally escort her?" I knew my tone was harsh and my words were sharp, but I had reached my breaking point like an overinflated balloon ready to burst. Richard was speaking at the same time, "She doesn't know the way home. Can't she call a cab like a normal person?" Richard scowled and furrowed his brow, then he sighed and turned to face Brian. "You take Lucy home, Jack, and Emily will come with us," he said abruptly, latching on to Lucy. "I want to ride with Grandma Lucy, I don't want to be with that old, boring Grandma Jack." Emily gave me a pitying look and attempted to pull him away, but he wriggled free again after all the chaos we had experienced. When I reached for the window button to get some air, Richard silently rolled it back up. "The winds are too strong. Jack might catch a car," he said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I withdrew my hand without saying anything, and the car fell into a heavy silence. It took several minutes before Richard finally said, "Maybe your behavior today was." I leaned back in the seat and said nothing until the car pulled into the garage. My voice was hoarse-like, and when I finally spoke, I could hardly recognize it as my own. "Emily, you think I was wrong too, don't you?" She didn't respond, but it was okay. It was totally inappropriate just like that. I noticed a moment of hesitation in her eyes in the rearview mirror, and that evasive, weak silence was more painful than any spoken answer. I laughed quietly. Not knowing why, because everything felt so ridiculous, almost comical. I had spent 40 years with this family, and in the end, not a single one of them remembered that it was my birthday. "We're home, let's get out," Richard said, turning off the engine and calling for when I didn't move. He sighed, came around to open my door, and reached out to help me. I brushed his hand away, but he seemed to be about to say something. Brian's car pulled up next to us, and he was already shouting, "Why are you still here, Mom? What exactly do you want? We didn't even plan to take you because we knew you'd cause a scene, so it's not like Dad and Lucy were off having sex." He said. "May, how could you hit Brian?" Emily cried out. "Have you lost your mind?" Richard shouted in fury, "You can't hit my dad." Jack jumped in. "What's the big deal? We just celebrated her birthday together," and his words hit me like a bucket of cold water straight in my face. The fire in my chest instantly rekindled, and I slapped him hard across the face. Brian's arms were spread wide in front of him, as if he was prepared to protect him from me. The three of them hurried forward to protect Brian, acting as though I were some crazy person about to lose it. Brian held his cheek wide in shock, and I had never touched him before. I had always been the gentle mother, so of course he couldn't understand, and my palms were still hurting. I looked icily at each of their faces. Different, but the same, and said, my tone was so bitter that cutting it startled Brian. Richard's face darkened even more, and he glared at me like ice. "This is so absurd. You've already embarrassed yourself in public, and now you're hitting your own son at home? You're almost 60. Can you stop acting so irrationally?" I actually laughed when I heard that I wasn't nearly 60. I said, paused purposefully, and said in a clear and steady voice, "I am 60 today." With that, I turned and went upstairs, leaving them all behind without even looking. When I got home, I went straight to the bedroom, locked the door, undressed, and scrubbed my face clean in a hot shower. No amount of water could relieve the weight on my chest, and then I heard Richard's voice at the door. I grabbed a pillow and pulled it over my head, not wanting to hear anything at all, but then my phone buzzed, and I reached for it without thinking, automatically unlocking the screen, and saw a message from Lucy. I opened it, honestly thinking my eyes locked on that one line, "We've celebrated together the past few years." I froze for a second, then began typing. "Are you saying that they've celebrated your birthday with you every year before this? Richard had told you about Brian and Emily coming today, so I assumed you knew." In addition, we've celebrated together the past few years, so I didn't think you'd misunderstand. Please don't be upset. Richard had spent almost every birthday with me since my husband's death, and after Jack was born, Brian and Emily would come over to read that message. The fire that had been burning so intensely inside of me simply went out, as if someone had taken the oxygen out of the room. It didn't even turn to smoke, just cold, lifeless ash. I felt so pitiful and ridiculous. I nearly laughed when I realized that my husband had been celebrating his ex's birthday for 10 years in a row, and my son had been joining them for 7. I had been in this family for 40 years, and nobody had ever remembered my birthday. I recalled how, every year on my birthday before getting married, my parents would prepare hot chocolate and a warm bowl of pasta for me. Simple gestures like placing a few candies on the side of the bowl occasionally gave me a sense of recognition. My mother worked as a cook in the hospital cafeteria, and my father worked the night shift at the factory. Despite their daily exhaustion, they never failed to recognize a birthday, neither mine nor my sister's. In this so-called family, even wishing someone a happy birthday felt excessive. Richard and I had met through a mutual friend, and we were married just 3 years later. In the early years, he still remembered my birthday. When he returned from business trips, he would bring small gifts, like a silk scarf or a watch, which I would always carefully tuck away, believing they were small symbols of our marriage. However, nothing happened until I opened the door. Months later, he had just quit a steady job to start his own business, and I threw myself into helping him manage everything at home so he could focus on his career. Emily had shown me how to check a user's posts on Lucy's social media account, so I scrolled through picture after picture, video after video, Richard hiking with her in the mountains, Richard picking apples with her on a farm, helping her with real estate paperwork, finding her an accountant to handle her taxes, changing her light bulbs, driving her to her annual birthday videos, cakes, gifts, and songs, and more. I removed my reading glasses and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling with my thoughts in a jumbled mess. The anger that had been boiling earlier had drained out, leaving only a heavy, aching pressure in my chest. Family photos. Richard. In almost every frame, someone looked at those pictures without context, thinking she was his wife. I kept scrolling, punishing myself with every post, not even realizing how long I'd been at it. My eyes burned with dryness, and my head hurt. I had no more tears to shed, so all I could do was try to swallow the lump in my throat by breathing in and out. However, my chest felt like it had a hole ripped through it, and the cold kept coming in waves until I couldn't stop shivering. I couldn't tell when I'd fallen asleep, because by the time I opened my eyes again, daylight had already filled the room. I sat up suddenly, seeing a flicker of then, like a crashing wave, the memories of yesterday came flooding back, and my hands froze in mid-motion, leaving me standing there rigid and unmoving. It hit me then more clearly than ever that I was no longer a wife, mother, or respected elder in this house. Panic tightened in my chest, and I had not even made breakfast yet. I was just a skilled living housekeeper, and before I could stop myself from laughing bitterly, Richard knocked on the door. Richard said, "May, breakfast is ready. Come down and eat." I didn't answer, so I just dragged myself to the bathroom, moving slowly under the weight of everything I was feeling. When I opened the door again, Richard was gone, so I went downstairs. Just when I got to the kitchen doorway, Brian was standing in front of me with a beautifully decorated birthday cake and 6 flickering candles on top. "Happy birthday, dear Mom." "Richard, and happy birthday to you." Emily and Brian were all singing and grinning as if the catastrophe from last night had never occurred. "Come on, Mom, make a wish and blow out the candles." I turned away and went to the refrigerator to pour myself a glass of cold milk. The icy liquid slid down my throat and settled in my stomach, dulling the sharp ache inside me. Brian said brightly, holding the cake out to me, his eyes sparkling as if he was still that little boy curled up in my arms. For some reason, the sight of his smiling face made my eyes well up instantly. I grabbed a piece of bread and started to head back upstairs when Brian said, "Maybe we all made mistakes last night. You can't just keep freezing everyone out." He placed the cake on the dining table. His voice tried to remain calm, but his face already showed signs of impatience. "Can you please stop being mad?" I didn't know how to face any of them. Richard reached out and grabbed my arm. He said bluntly, "It's understandable that we forgot, but do you really need to make it such a big deal?" I looked at him and spoke in a steady but low voice. "What exactly do you mean by, we all made mistakes? Are you saying that I was wrong to show up and interrupt your happy little family celebration? You haven't celebrated your birthday in years." Emily rushed over to steady me, saying, "May, don't be upset. We promise we'll celebrate properly next year, okay? Please don't be sad anymore." Lucy would never cause a scene like this, and the way they said it with such certainty and self-righteousness made my stomach turn. I hurried to the sink and gagged the milk I had just swallowed, coming right back up. Putting my hand away, I looked at Brian and said, "If you love Lucy so much, why don't you let her be your mother instead? Can you stop this insanity already? Do you even hear yourself?" Brian's voice snapped, "You sound ridiculous." Richard then lost control, which I had hardly ever seen in our 40 years of marriage. He had always been aloof, detached, and emotionless, but the Brian seemed surprised by his father's outburst and fell silent for a moment, but I felt strangely calmer than ever as the anger, humiliation, and hurt all went away when Lucy's name was mentioned. It wasn't that he couldn't show emotion, he just never had any for me. Instead, what was left was something quieter, something heavier, a kind of hollow, bone-deep exhaustion. 40 years of marriage, decades of devotion, and all of that seemed like nothing at that point. "I'm not crazy, and I'm not talking gibberish," I said calmly, staring Richard in the eyes. "I want a divorce." Brian exploded, "Mom, are you insane at your age that you want to start bringing up divorce as if it's some sort of..." Richard hadn't even spoken yet, but Brian was already hurling every insult he could think of, quickly and sharply, each one going deeper than the last. If this had been the old me, I might have sobbed, blamed myself, wondered if I was being unreasonable, or even cried, but now I see that there are other men out there who are still waiting for someone like you. Richard's jaw tightened, his brow furrowed so deeply it was like a knot carved into his face. I could see he was angry, but what stood out even more was the annoyance and pure exasperation in his expression. He wasn't hurt, and he wasn't disgusted. I just felt tired, and disgusted. "The marital assets will be divided fairly, the children are grown, so custody isn't an issue. I'll have my lawyer draft the divorce agreement and send it to you. I'm flying to Seattle this week for a business trip, and I won't be back until the conference is over. Hopefully, by the time I get back, you'll have come to your senses." He grabbed his coat and left without saying anything else, didn't even look back, and didn't give me a chance to reply. I'm 60 years old, and I don't think this whole act is a bit pathetic. Care to stop him? There was nothing left to say between us but exhaustion, Mom. Brian muted behind me as we sang Happy Birthday and brought out a cake, giving you a chance to put everything behind you. But no, you had to keep going. Are you happy now that you made Dad leave? I never asked you to do any of that. I said that without turning around, then went upstairs to my room, where I started packing following a brief sorting process. I realized it was time to begin making plans for the future. I grabbed my phone and looked for a legal advice channel I had been following. The host was a 40-something lawyer who specialized in helping women in challenging situations, and her advice was always straightforward and approachable. I had discovered her channel while browsing social media one day, and ever since, I've frequently tuned in to follow the instructions. After learning from Emily, I emailed her and called the legal office on her channel homepage to arrange a consultation. After I finished packing, I noticed that everything I actually owned in the 40-year-old house I had lived in could fit in a single suitcase and a tiny backpack. I took the gold and silver jewelry Richard had given me over the years, as well as the household bank card I had always managed, and I intend to visit. I rolled my suitcase out the door of the bank and transferred the entire amount to the account I had opened before marriage. I didn't have much money, but I had managed every household expense for years, budgeting down to the cent. I had always saved with Brian in mind for emergencies for his future. Looking back, I'm sure he never gave that money any thought, so if that's the case, I have every right to take it back for myself. Home I had lived in for 40 years and went to a small, old-fashioned hotel downtown that I had often passed when I was younger. It had always seemed peaceful and reassuring to me, so after checking in, I went straight to the LA office to meet the lawyer. She seemed a little taken aback to see me because not every 60-year-old woman shows up saying she's ready to start over, but there was no condescending advice, no talk of as I got up to go. I couldn't help but ask, "Don't you think I'm being ridiculous getting divorced at 60? She listened intently as I explained my situation, took notes on every detail, and provided clear professional legal guidance. I immediately signed the engagement agreement and paid the retainer, and she scheduled a formal contract signing for the following day. After leaving the law office, I stopped by the train station with the assistance of a ticket agent and purchased a one-way ticket back to my hometown in Portland. Her voice was warm but firm, saying, "Maybe if a woman decides to walk away at 60, it means she's already endured far more than she should have." She said it gently, almost casually, but it made my throat tighten, and I had to blink hard to keep my eyes from crying. After years of non-stop busyness, I went to the roadside diner and ordered a cheeseburger to satisfy my hunger before returning to the hotel. When I entered the lobby, the front desk clerk greeted me with a bright smile and said, "You're back early today." I got everything taken care of, so I thought I'd come back and rest. I replied, "Not here on vacation." Her casual question, "You seem so independent, don't you have any friends around here to meet up with?" caught me off guard for a moment. I just stood there in shock, realizing that in 40 years, I had never made a single true friend. All of my thoughts and efforts had focused on that house, and I had never even created a circle of my own. I shook my head and smiled slightly bitterly, realizing that I don't have any friends. My mom recently started taking classes at a senior center, and she's made a lot of new friends and even started dating again. I asked what kind of classes she was taking, and she said that there were all kinds of photography, pottery, dance, flower arranging, and even travel clubs. The majority of the city's community centers offer programs. Like, one thing I'd always regretted was never attending college because my family didn't have the money, so I went straight to work after high school without giving myself the chance to continue my education. Then came marriage, then responsibilities, and life just got busier and busier until the idea of learning again just faded away. However, the world has changed, so I nodded and silently tucked the idea inside my heart. It's really difficult to live independently in today's society without an education and the capacity to learn new things. I talked to the young receptionist in the hotel lobby all afternoon, and as the hours went by without incident, the weight I had been carrying began to lighten. Before it was even dark, my phone rang, and Emily answered. She asked, "May, are you not home? Are you coming back for dinner tonight? Do you want me to make dinner? I've moved out, Emily, so you can all eat tonight without me." I didn't wait for her to say anything else, I just hung up. I was calmer now, but there was still a glimmer of annoyance there. I picked up my phone once more and turned to the front desk employee, "Sweetheart," and asked gently if she could help me block some contacts. "I'm not sure how to do that, of course, so who do you want?" She asked joyfully, as usual, if I wanted to block calls or social media, and I told her firmly. She then patiently walked me through the process, showing me how to block numbers and remove people from my contacts, as well as how to manage my blocked list in case I changed my mind. When we were finished, I smiled and gave her a cup of coffee in exchange. She even showed me how to order pizza online, so we shared a pizza. I said calmly, "Come on, stop being so dramatic, just come home already." Before I went back upstairs to my room, the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I answered, and my son's voice came through. "If you return, I won't tell Dad you ran away, but you better unblock us from enough of this nonsense. If you keep doing this and Dad gets really upset and divorces you, then what are you going to live on the street, Brian?" After a few days, neither Brian nor Emily contacted me again. I worked closely with my lawyer to finalize the divorce agreement and had the papers mailed straight to the house. After giving it some thought, I took Richard off of my blocked list and sent him a message saying, "The divorce agreement has been sent. Please sign it as soon as you receive it once the documents are finalized." He didn't reply, so once everything was in order and I had my lawyer's best wishes, I started getting ready to move back to my hometown. When I walked into the old house where I had grown up, I was astonished by the feeling of security that swept over me, so I spent the entire day cleaning it from top to bottom, removing the dust, and the following morning, I went to the closest furniture store and selected some new pieces, discarding old furniture that had no place in this new chapter of my life. Everything could now be delivered and installed at home, which was very convenient because I didn't have to strain at my age to move heavy items piece by piece. After the delivery crew finished setting up and departing, I took a look around the renovated space, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. There was a glimmer of genuine hope for the future because I had been so busy for days that I hadn't anticipated the message. Richard told me that he was detached the same way he had always been when you returned, which was how things had worked between us for 40 years. Every time we argued, he would go away for a few days and then come back acting as though nothing had happened, saying that it gave me time to calm down. At the time, I believed that was how things worked. When he casually resumed talking, I took it as a sign of reconciliation and let everything go. Looking back, I now realize how stupid it was to not explain anything this time. I just replied, "Contact me after you've signed the divorce papers." Richard never responded again, and I knew he still thought he could wear me down the way he always had, with emotional absence and silence. Distance that I had finally given up, as I always did, but I didn't care anymore, so I turned to my new life. I contacted the local community center, and, with the assistance of a staff member, I enrolled in classes at the senior learning program. As I entered that light-filled, roomy building, I came to the realization that life in the second half doesn't have to be limited to kitchens, households, and never-ending compromise, but it can also be full of music, laughter, crafts, and discovery. I signed up for a computer skills workshop, a choir group, a baking class, and an introductory English course. Mornings were spent in class. Afternoons were spent practicing hands-on, and some evenings were spent conversing and getting together with new classmates. For the first time, life had rhythm, and I felt truly fulfilled by the kitchen and stove that had previously trapped me. Repetition and sacrifice started to fade from my memory piece by piece, and I even started learning how to take care of myself. Again. I tried on clothes I never would have dared to wear before, went to the salon, and got a modern perm, which was something new and fun. I made a lot of friends, including a kind-hearted woman in the choir group, a retired Army veteran from my baking class, and my computer class instructor, a young man named Sam, who that evening, choir practice went later than usual, and by the time I arrived home, it was almost 9. I saw Richard leaning against the porch column, looking worn out and exhausted. I looked at him, but I didn't say anything, so I stepped past him to get my keys from my bag. Once inside, I poured myself a glass of warm water to clear my throat, and then I finally said, "What are you doing here?" "I came to take you home. We're not young anymore, so do we really need to drag this out? If not, I'll file for divorce through the court file on the grounds that I haven't abused you or cheated on you." "This is my home," I said calmly. "Did you sign the divorce papers?" He sighed, rubbing his temples, obviously exhausted. "What specifically are you going to sue me for?" I raised my phone, spoke steadily, and backed up all of your and Lucy's social media posts from the previous 10 years. I've already had them notarized, and they may be used as indirect proof of infidelity. "I didn't cheat," he yelled, losing control of his rage. I saw the twisted expression on his face, and you know what's really ironic? I'm your legal wife, and her entire profile is filled with pictures of you. Richard stared at me, his patience clearly gone. "You're just a housewife with a high school diploma, no job, and no experience. Do you really think you can live a decent life without me?" Suddenly, you let out a quiet laugh. "Your decision about whether or not you cheated is for a judge. It's been the happiest month of my life without you, Richard. I found a lawyer on my own, boarded a train, cleaned out my old house, and began to rebuild my life piece by piece. You've looked down on me for years, haven't you?" I stepped closer, staring into the face I'd known for 40 years. The contempt, the condescension, it was very evident now. "Richard, you've always believed that I wasn't suitable for you, didn't you? So why did you marry me in the first place? You only wanted a housekeeper to take care of your life so you could concentrate on your career. Did you ever even briefly see me as your wife?" His face darkened even more, but he attempted to change the subject. "I didn't mistreat you. Did I ever cause you pain? You lived a comfortable life without ever having to work. Most women would be envious of you." I laughed bitterly, "But try living it up yourself. Every morning before dawn, you cook breakfast, run around pots and pans, wash your clothes, do your son's laundry, cook for the entire family, and clean the entire house. And have you ever washed your own dirty socks?" "I'm done with all that over a little housework," he muttered, clearly annoyed. "That's right," I snapped in a firm, hoarse voice. "Yes, it's too much for me. I'm done being your unpaid housemate. Underwear, you think this house stayed on its own, you think the trash just disappeared. If you call that a good life, then by all means, go live it. You're being ridiculous." Richard finally muttered, "Perfect," and then he said, "You can go now. You have 1 week to sign the papers, or I'll file the lawsuit myself." I closed the door in his face. "I spent 40 years serving your family for nothing, only to be criticized and dismissed." "Well, I quit, Richard." I genuinely believed that after our heated argument that evening, Richard would sign the divorce papers and put an end to it, but to my surprise, a week later, he showed up at my door with Brian, Jack, and tow, making a scene in front of the neighbors to prevent more rumors. I reluctantly let them in, and as soon as they did, Jack rushed into my arms and started crying. "Grandma, Tu had a fever a few days ago, and I really missed you." I pulled him away gently because I had plans to ask your parents to make dinner tonight. Jack looked shocked and then slowly retreated into Emily's arms. That's when Brian finally said, "Mom, we came today to take you home." Jack had been sick twice. "Jack is your child, not mine. I raised you, fulfilled my role as a mother, and now it's your turn to be a father." I then turned to Richard. "Did you sign the paperwork? If not, I'm bringing the lawsuit. Since you left, he's lost weight 2 times, once from a cold and the other from an allergic reaction. Emily and I are not good at caring for him." I even spoke to Dad, who promised that there would be no more contact with Lucy and that we would make sure your birthdays are celebrated appropriately going forward. "That's right," May Emily commented on every marriage. Brian said, quickly, "This week, Mom, so please don't get upset. We've really been thinking things over, and I admit that we were wrong to forget your birthday. We sincerely apologize. Misconceptions. Richard genuinely cares about you. He was the one who insisted that we come get you today." I looked at her. With no anger, just quiet exhaustion. Emily was a kind person, but she was the type that quietly places responsibility on others, particularly the elderly members of the household. She had never really seen things from my perspective, all she wanted was for everything to go smoothly and quietly in harmony, so I looked her in the eyes and inquired, "Would you be okay with that?" Emily's expression changed instantly. Of course, she couldn't accept that, and that meant she had no right to ask Brian if one day he reconnects with his high school sweetheart after her husband dies and starts feeling sorry for her, taking her hiking, traveling, helping with her errands, changing her light bulbs, handling her paperwork, and then celebrating her birthday for 10 straight years with your child along too. I said, "You didn't come here because you truly understood your mistakes. You came because you finally realized that without your housekeeper, this house doesn't run so smoothly." I turned to Brian, who said, "That's probably the dirtiest pair of shoes you've ever worn, isn't it? No one to clean them, they don't magically shine themselves." Richard then said, "That shirt is a wrinkled mess, you've been wearing it for days. Haven't you finally realized that clothes don't come cleanly pressed, you really need to iron them?" And then Emily began to realize that having a child isn't exactly a leisurely pastime, it's exhausting, thankless, and never-ending. As my words hit the floor, the room fell silent, with everyone sitting with their heads bowed and me feeling more certain than ever. Richard cleared his throat, his voice rough, and a worn-out expression settled over his face. "I'll help with the cleaning. And break off any contact with Lucy. Can you find it in your heart to forgive us?" "No," I responded without hesitation. "We didn't know how much you've done and took everything for granted, but we're ready to do better. If you finish this, Mom, there is nothing more to discuss. Please go, I have plans for tonight. Divorce, how? Are you going to manage your life alone, and who will look after you in your latter years?" Brian remarked in a plainly panicked manner, "If you get sick," and I couldn't help but giggle. Recalled a video I'd seen in a recent online course and responded, "As long as I can breathe, when I'm elderly, I'll move into a nursing home. If I become seriously ill, I'll just depart from this world with no further regrets," and our discussion abruptly came to a chilly halt as they turned to Grandma. Mom remarked, "You don't want Grandpa anymore. Does that mean I should?" Jack stopped at the door and turned back to face me. I responded, with a slight smile, "Didn't you say you liked Lucy Grandma more? Grandpa should ask. Lucy, you can marry her, and she will become your new grandmother." Jack's face brightened up. "Be my new grandmother," and he joyfully left me to watch his tiny face develop, fade away along the path, and the final thread connecting me to that house was finally severed. Children don't say things like so, someone educated him on their own, and now I felt alone, regardless of whether it was Lucy or Richard. Nothing but freedom following his return home. Richard quickly signed the divorce papers without any further dispute. He even offered me a bigger share of our joint assets, which I accepted without question. Hesitancy. A month later, I finally received the divorce decree in my hands after learning how I launched an online baking channel and used my phone to record and edit videos. I wasn't very good at editing, but people were captivated by the allure of an elderly woman sharing her homemade recipes, and my background in baking provided me with a small but devoted following, and as time went on, my network of acquaintances grew from fellow due to a startling number of younger individuals who liked talking about life and learning from me. Finally, I heard that Richard and Lucy had finally dated, but that their relationship didn't work out as planned since Lucy lacked talent for housekeeping and was unable to run the household. Rather than letting her settle in, the family had to adapt. She attempted to assist Jack around her, but she ended up giving him food that caused a severe allergy that required. Shortly after Richard was admitted to the hospital following that event, Brian moved out with Emily and Jack permanently. After receiving a cancer diagnosis, he had surgery and remained bedridden for the duration of his recuperation. When Lucy filed for divorce, she took half of Richard's assets with her. Now that Richard is recuperating at home, Jack quit her job to become a full-time homemaker, and Emily quit her job to care for him. I discovered all of this through sporadic communications. Emily continues to provide me with informal updates and tidbits of chatter when she told me that she had resigned from her work. I told her that I didn't condemn her decisions at the moment, but if she ever wanted to, it's never too late to start afresh. Yes, it wasn't until I was 60 that too didn't start living the life I had put off for 40 years until I finally learned to love myself.